I encourage everyone to take a moment and breathe and take a tea cheers with a Jiri tea. A Jiri tea recognizes the beauty in shared stories and shared opportunities. Ajiri sources award-winning tea from Kenya, employs women in the region to handcraft the labels, and sends 100% of the profits back to the region to support orphan education. Save 10% on your order of Kenyan teas and coffee with the code BeautifullyHuman at ajiritea.com. AJIRIT.com. Tea mugs up. Hello and welcome to the Beautifully Human podcast. I'm Nick Sheesby. In this podcast, I speak with beautiful humans from all around the world, sharing with you their incredible stories, revealing the power in every human story, to spread love and humanity to a world that is in desperate need of it, to show that we can all connect in beautiful ways, no matter where we come from or what we look like. What you will find out is that we are all beautifully human. Let's all be beautifully human. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining me for the Beautifully Human podcast. Today, I'm hanging out with Jamie Gane, who is an adaptive athlete, and we have such a cool conversation about creativity in the pandemic and just a hell of a story about his life. I really hope you enjoy this, and if you enjoy the podcast, follow on Spotify and on Instagram at the Beautifully Human Podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcast. It helps so much. And as always, enjoy this beautiful conversation. All right, dude. Well, I like to start these off with a big overarching question and let you control the narrative of it and just say, tell me a story about your life.
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. A story about my life. Well, I mean, I have so many different stories I could tell you. There's the story that I put out on my social media pages and I put out on my website, which is, my big story about my amputation, which is, I guess, the kind of the meaty bit that people like to hear, and then all those little stories come off from that, which is quite cool. So that kind of, story is about the age of 9. I was a wheelchair user because I was visiting the US at the time with my family, and I was at Disney, and all of a sudden, kind of my feet collapsed from under me. I was kind of just walking along, and my feet just felt I just felt so exhausted from my feet, and I just collapsed really. When I went back to the UK, the doctors said, we don't really know what's going on, but we think you have this condition called plantar fasciitis, which is a really common condition, and it's basically just pain on the underfoot. And a lot of the time, runners get this, or different types of people get it. They don't get it till they're quite old, not old, but older.
Yeah.
And they said, well, in order to solve it, we're going to do some therapies on it. We're going to do some different invasive treatments, and if that doesn't work, then we'll go down the kind of surgical route. So they tried the treatments out. I was about 9 years old. Tried the treatments out, and then I went down the surgical route. And by the time I was kind of 16, I already had about 25 operations, just trying to solve this problem with my foot. Originally, it was in both feet. The left one kind of solved itself, but the right one just really didn't at all. And it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was a full-time wheelchair user. I couldn't use my right foot at all, couldn't get it wet, couldn't wear shoes or socks, couldn't do really anything with it, And even having the bed sheets on it at night was just so tricky. So when I was 16, I went to the doctors and said, I've had all these surgeries. What are you now going to do? And they said, oh, well, it's okay. We can do more surgeries. And I was like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not game for this. I'm trying to do my exams. I'm trying to do all this other stuff. Can we just do something else? And they said, oh, well, this, and this, all surgical options. Or if not, amputation is on the cards, but that's for years down the line. And I kind of said to them, look, I'm 16 years old. I've had 25 operations already. Can we start to consider actually amputation could be a viable option? And they said, oh, you're only 16, you don't know what you're talking about, very kind of belittling.
Sure.
And I said, I do know what I'm talking about. I'm going to fight for it. And that really, that fight was kind of the start of a really big journey to get to where I am today, where 6 years after trying to find someone, going from surgeon to surgeon, I eventually found a surgeon who was willing to amputate. So I had my right leg amputated below the knee, and in 2016, and really my life just started from then on. After 14 years in a wheelchair, I started to walk. When I started to walk, I then learned to run, and then from running to competing, and I kind of get to where I am now. So it's kind of a shortened version of a
Yeah.
nice kind of my little story.
Man, when you said plantar fasciitis, I was like, I've definitely heard of that, and I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think I've had it, but I know when you said it, I was like, I knew that was a pretty common one. And
Mm.
it's crazy that it was 6 years it took for someone to be okay with taking your leg.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things that the theory is that because I had so many operations, it started off as plantar fasciitis and then developed into a different condition called complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS, which is basically a problem with the way that your brain and a part of your body connects. So, for example,
Okay.
if you fall over, you break your arm. 6 weeks later, that nerve pathway has kind of repaired itself, and your arm is a little bit achy, but it's okay. But with CRPS, what happens is even if you break your arm, after 6 weeks, those nerve pathways are still not really working. So your brain is telling your body that you're still in pain, even though structurally there's nothing wrong with it. So
Hmm.
when you looked at X-rays and scans of my foot, apart from the deterioration of not using it for 14 years, it effectively there was nothing wrong with it.
Hmm.
But all these nerve pathways, the doctor's saying, well, if we cut the foot off, then the problem is the nerves are still there. So you're still going to have the same pain. You're still going to be in exactly the same situation. And it wasn't really until I started doing sort of the higher end of sport in my wheelchair. And I said, well, actually, that's great. If I'm still in the amount of pain I'm in now, that's fine. But actually, I don't qualify for any, I'm not disabled as far as anyone's concerned, as far as any Olympic or Paralympic committee is
Okay.
concerned. And I'm not able bodied because I can't walk or I can't do loads of other things that able bodied
Sure.
people can do. So I was kind of stuck in this in between, and amputation was kind of that thing that would help push me into one side and at least give me a possibility of being able to walk again.
Yeah. Wow. I hadn't even thought about that. That it was that you were kind of in that limbo. Man, that's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah. I mean, it's good fun. I mean, people would look at me in my wheelchair, and I look strong, and my left leg was quite beefy, and my right leg was really small, and it was kind of like quite a big mental barrier of people seeing you as though you're able-bodied, but you're really not, and you're not able to do things that they would expect people to be in a wheelchair to be able to do, or you're able to do things that they can't. And obviously, everybody with a disability is completely individual, and everybody throughout the whole world has their own abilities and disabilities with things. And it was kind of nice, when I had my leg amputated, and I was like, this is it. I could just walk into a room and be like, hey, I don't have a leg,
Yeah.
instead of this whole like, I have a leg, but I can't use it, and I can't do this. It's just so much simpler.
Sure.
Like, just it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Yeah,
I imagine it just has to be such a, yeah, just, I mean, I can't think of a good word for it right now, but just having to even explain, like, okay, well, I got this going on with this, and like, because so
yeah,
much of what people see of you is visual, and then they judge you immediately, and so I can't even
yeah,
imagine the amount of shit that was coming in, like, oh well, you have this, but not the, like the comparison
yeah,
game.
yeah. And I mean, I think most of the time, a lot of people who are, if you say, for example, you're a paraplegic who uses a wheelchair, you don't necessarily have to explain your disability. You kind of walk into a room or wheel into a room, and people go, okay, cool, you're in a wheelchair. That's it. And with the exception of, is the venue wheelchair accessible? Is there a disabled
Sure.
toilet? You know, all those kind of practical issues. There's no need really for anyone to explain their disability. But with my foot, because if anybody touched it, you know, I'd be in bed for a week in pain.
Hmm.
So it's almost like I created this bubble around me where I couldn't get anyone close. So if I was having a conversation with someone and they were just that little bit too close, I'd just have to say, look, I'm really sorry. Like, I've got a problem with my foot. I need you to back away. You know, keep this two
Oh
meter
man.
distance.
Yeah.
Socially, like
Yeah, I was gonna say.
coronavirus in my leg would have been great. Like, don't come near me.
I was totally gonna say
Yeah,
that. I was like, dude,
yeah,
yeah, this social distance, you
yeah.
would have been like, thank you. Perfect timing for
Yes.
that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then I
Been
don't
many
even have to
years.
explain it. Just please, like,
Yeah.
Corona, stay away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Definitely.
So when you finally had it amputated, what was it like learning? Did you have to learn to walk again?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, so one of the main things is the children that had a lot of difficulties with was when I was about 16, along with one of these surgeries, you know, they said they were going to do prior to amputation. They did a spinal cord surgery. So they basically had me sitting on the edge of a, you know, a typical hospital bed, and they basically went in underneath my armpits while I was still awake and snipped away at my spinal cord injury, my spinal cord. And you know, there was like a nurse who was kind of tickling my feet at the same time and said, you know, can you feel this? No. Okay, snip a little bit more. Can you feel this? Okay, snip. It wasn't quite as dramatic as that, but it's kind of how in my head, you know, that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
And they snipped away and they kept snipping until I had no feeling. And the idea was that the spinal cord would then sort of like repair itself and repair itself in a way that I didn't have this pathway problem. So I was like, okay, cool. You know, 16-year-old me, like, I don't know anything about science. Yeah, that works. Um, trust the doctors. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Uh, and it kind of did work, you know, that I didn't have as much pain. But the problem is that I was then left with no feeling at all. The spinal cord didn't really repair itself
Mm.
fully, and you know, even to this day, I have pretty much no feeling from below my waist. So if you imagine trying to learn how to walk after you've had your leg amputated while you also can't feel your legs is quite tricky. So, you
Yeah.
know, I kind of it sounds really stalkerish, but I would go to like my local park and I would just watch people walk. And I kind of like look at them and think like how do you walk? You know, what does your foot do? What does your knee do? What does your hip do? And I'd kind of try and mentally imagine what that would be like to walk like that. So
Wow.
then when it came to, you know, my like physical therapy sessions, I could kind of put that theory into practice. Um, because it's great watching, you know, walking videos on YouTube, for example, but
Yeah.
you know, they're on like a treadmill. It's just
Right.
too
Right.
robotic, you know. I wanted to actually know how real people walk. So
Yeah.
it was fun. It was fun. It was like a lot of falling over, a lot of kind of the hospital were very much like, okay, you got your leg, off you go now. I was like, okay, cool, let's do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
That's fun.
And I mean, I imagine just, I mean, people watching in general is fun, but like, I imagine just when you're actually watching someone walk, there's so many different walks. I imagine it was just fun, like
Oh yeah,
being like, oh, look at that. That's so different. That's so different. Oh, wow.
yeah, completely. You know, I think the it was kind of like frustrating at some points because I was a bit like, how do you walk? Because everyone walks so
Right.
differently. You
Yeah.
know, I kind of know the basics, but how do you walk? And that was
Yeah.
that was part of the fun. You know, it's kind of exploring that. It didn't matter at first if I was a bit limpy because everyone is different. Everyone
Sure.
walks in their own way.
Yeah. And what a thought to have, because I've thankfully in the privilege that I have, I've never had to think about like how do you walk. But I mean, when you said when you can't feel, I know how weird it is when like you just your leg falls asleep if you've sat on it in a weird way, and then like you get up and it's like, oh shit, I can't feel the
Hmm.
bottom of my, I can't feel my foot right now, and you get yeah. So
Yeah.
just to even have to have those thoughts and conquer that is pretty incredible. And then to do all the running and everything that you're doing now is really amazing.
Thank you. It was a lot of kind of just accepting that I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah.
It's kind of my my motto is just go for it. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So how did you start to get into did you have aspirations to do the Tough Mudders and all the stuff you're doing now when you were younger? Was that something you had interest in, or did you just kind of like how did you get into doing that?
Um, to be honest, I don't have like a clear plan of this is what I want to do, um, because my condition started when I was 9.
Sure. Yeah.
All the kind of childhood sports that you do, I just didn't really do. So one of the sports I really loved as a kid was rounders, which is a bit like baseball.
Okay.
And someone I could kind of like sit there or stand there and whack it, and I was really good at whacking the ball as far as possible. And then I was really good, like halfway through you swap around, so you're in the field and the other team's batting. And I was really good, like just stood there and someone would throw me the ball and I could throw it, like I could really throw a ball. Obviously I couldn't run to the ball. I'd be like, hey, go run for it and pass it to me, and then I'd throw it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved that. As a kid, I also did judo,
Hmm.
from the age of 3 because my brother did it, and I loved it, and I had to stop it, because of my foot. And when I was looking at, amputation as a possibility, I realized how strong you had to be an amputee.
Hmm.
You have to have the strength in your legs to be able to carry the extra weight of a prosthetic. You have to be good in your upper body because if you fall over, you need to be able to get up, so simple things like that. So I started looking at para sport, so disabled sport in general. And I found a few things that really interested me. The first one was para powerlifting. So,
Hmm.
normal powerlifting, with the exception of it's only bench press. So I started doing that. And I also really liked the idea of doing seated shot put, discus, and javelin because
Hmm.
I love that just throwing stuff. It was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool. So I started doing that. And then I started to use a different device. It's called an eye walk, and it's basically like it's very similar to an above knee amputation. So you sort of slot your knee into this brace, and you can kind of walk around a bit. You can't run on it or anything like that. But I started throwing seated, and then I started throwing on this eye walk, and then my coach at the time started kind of saying, "Well, why don't we try and do some kind of running drills on this eye walk?" And then this was a similar time to kind of when I was having my amputation. So I'd built up the strength from doing my powerlifting. I started to really enjoy the strength stuff, and there was a racing wheelchair team attached
Hmm.
to that. So I tried out wheelchair racing. Couldn't really do it because of my foot; it was just too uncomfortable. But then when I had my amputation, I figured, well, I can now walk, so the seated throwing isn't too much. Okay, let's try the throwing standing up. Okay, I can do that. Let's do some throwing with like a little bit more movement. Let's do the throwing with a bit more running. Oh, running. Well, this thing is fun. Okay, let's do some running now. So then it kind of just like naturally progressed to running. And then obviously because I loved my judo as well, I just
Hmm.
started doing judo. So it's a very long-winded way of just basically saying that the sports that I found, I just kind of found them naturally.
Yeah.
I went back to judo naturally, um, and they just naturally progressed through to kind of what they do now. Before my amputation, I did a few tough mudders in my wheelchair, just
Oh
try
wow.
and try them out, and I really got the bug. Yeah, just I just
Totally.
loved it, and I
Yeah.
saw it as a nice kind of challenge. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I think I did my first like, walking with crutches and then walking without crutches, and then I got a running blade, so running it, and then let's see if I can run the whole thing without stopping. Let's see if I can do a 12-hour one. Let's see if I can do a 24-hour one, and it just kind of stepped up from there.
Holy shit. What
You're looking at me like you don't agree.
I well, the only thing I can relate to, and it's not even as tough as a Tough Mudder, is I did a half marathon, but I didn't train for it, and I was like, dude, 2.5
Hmm.
hours of just running was hell for me. It was crazy, and so I'm just like,
Hmm.
as you
Yeah.
added hours, I was just like, oh my god. First off, I didn't know there was a 24-hour Tough Mudder. That's gnarly. What's that experience like?
Yeah. Oof. But it's honestly the toughest challenge I've ever done. I didn't hit my goal at all. So it happens once a year. It was in Atlanta the year that
Oh
I
yeah.
did it, and basically you have 5 mile loops. So you have like a little sort of tent set up with a little table with all your stuff on it, and you go and do a 5 mile loop, and then at the end of that 5 mile loop, you can eat some food, you can go to the toilet, you can rest if you want to, and then you just go out and try and do as many loops as possible. So I'd set myself a goal, and I didn't really train for it. I mean, I'd kind of done, I think I did like 30 tough mudders that year, and that was my training. So
Sure.
I went for this world's toughest mudder, and each 5 mile loop has about 20, 25 obstacles in it, and they open up at different times. The thing I hadn't really taken into account was the cold. And this is the thing:
Okay.
you're going from midday on the Saturday to midday Sunday, and it got down to -4 degrees Celsius,
Yikes.
which is like, yeah, really, really cold. And I just really suffered with the cold. I got hypothermia. I really was really not feeling very well at all. To give you an example, I came into my pit area, my tent area, and this was about, I think it was about 2 a.m., something like that. I'd run 25 miles by this point, and I said, I'm just going to do a rest. So I sat down in this chair outside of my tent, and I took my leg off. I got ready to change all of my clothes so I could warm up. I took my leg off, and my pit crew, the team that were with me, went off to the tent to go and get me a hot chocolate, or to make me hot chocolate. And then when they came back, I'd fallen asleep, and the sweat on my leg, on my stump, had actually frozen,
Oh my
and I had
God.
to break the ice off of my stump to be able to put my leg back on to then be able to get out again. It was so cold. It just
Oh
can't. And
man.
you're like, you get warm and you have to jump in water obstacles, or you have to
Oh
jump off.
God.
I think it's either 30 or 40 feet.
Mm.
It's just like, just off a cliff, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really hard,
Good
but
Lord.
I only managed, I think I did 30 miles that 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 weekend, which is not what I wanted to do. But it's uneven terrain, freezing cold temperatures, and I did, just a few weeks ago, I did a 12-hour one, and I ran 41 miles. So the terrain can make a big difference, the
Sure.
temperature can make a big difference, but it's part of that kind of community, and it was a really amazing challenge that's kind of inspired me to train a little bit more and get
Yeah.
out there a bit better.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it was good. It was fun.
crazy just getting ice frozen on you. And yeah, because I know I have a couple friends who have done, I don't think
Mm,
they've done anything like the 24-hour one, but I know they've done a Tough Mudder, and I was just like,
mm,
man, it's really amazing when you set yourself to do something like that. And I don't know, it was funny. When I did my half marathon, my brother just randomly called me and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do a half marathon," and it was for his 35th birthday. And I was like,
yeah.
"You know what? Fuck it, dude. I'm gonna come to Boston and I'm gonna do this with you, and let's just do it." And he's like, "Are you gonna
Yeah.
train?" And I was like, "I walk a lot. I go for walks every day, and that's." I mean, I will say that it got me in enough to finish that, or I'm just a stubborn bastard and I made myself finish.
Mm,
But that was brutal. And then there was no
yeah.
obstacles. There was just like at the 9 mile mark, there was an uphill, and I was just like, "You sons of bitches, that's terrible."
Okay.
But man, um,
Yeah. You're like, oh, I think I'm doing okay. And you hit the hill.
yeah,
Maybe not.
I was actually pretty proud of myself for the pace I was keeping, and then the hill came, and then it took me another hour to finish.
Right.
I was doing pretty
Okay.
well, and then it was like oh, that almost made me stop, but I finished. So, but man, that's just wild. So what did the Tough Mudder look like now with all the COVID going on? The one you just did.
So we currently don't have. So that was a virtual one.
Ah, okay,
I
okay.
did. So it's kind of a similar setup. So you go from home and then do a 5 mile loop. And then when you get home, you have to do a challenge or an obstacle. So, for
Ah,
an
okay.
example, one challenge was you kind of did a 5 by 5 grid with cards, and then you flip over one card per column, and then do the exercise that's on the card. So, for example, it might be, hearts is press ups, diamonds is tricep dips, squats, etc. And then the number correlates to the amount you do. So,
Ah,
you're only going to do something like 40 or 50 squats, which
okay.
isn't really that bad. And then you obviously have to then run another. Some of them were more physical challenges, like the one I just said, and some of them were more mental challenges. So I think it was something like the sixth loop. So you've just run 30 miles. The event started at 6 a.m. and it said that you had to create I might get the numbers wrong, but it's like a 2 foot ring on the floor with flour, because they send you a packing list two
Okay.
weeks before the event and say this is what you have to buy, and then you have to get a football, like a soccer ball, and then stand 15 feet away, throw it up in the air so it's 6 foot above your head, and it has to land within the ring of flour. And oh, no, no, it wasn't throwing. You had to kick it. You had to kick it up in the air 6 foot above your head and land in this ring, and you'd already run 30 miles, and
Jeez.
it's not physically demanding, but you're like, what am I doing,
Yeah.
what is my life, what has my life come
Yeah.
to? It's yeah. And one of them, we had to do, you had to strap 2 kilograms of flour on your back, and then you had to do the whole lap with 2 kilograms of flour on your back, which was fine for the first 3 miles, and then the last 2 miles were just deadly. And then you also had to bear crawl
Hmm.
300 meters, so on your sort of like hands and knees crawling for 300 meters, and it all just kind of takes time. But to be honest, it was a really good event. I did it with my best friend, and yeah, we set a goal at 30 miles, thinking, 30 is realistic. It's 5 miles every 2 hours, considering the obstacles. Um, and then we thought maybe 35 miles, but we ended up doing 40 official miles, but 41 actual miles. It
That's
was it
amazing.
was a good time. Yeah, the Monday at work was not fun.
Yeah, no kidding. Man,
Yeah,
and I just think that's so cool. Like, as terrible as this whole year has been for so many people in so many different ways, like, the creativity that's had to come out of it is really impressive. I would never even have thought of that, but like you said, it's not physically grueling, but to just be sitting there kicking a ball into a ring of flour after
yeah,
30 miles, you're like, what the hell is going on? But it's so good. Like, I
yeah,
love that somebody was sitting there, like, okay, we want to make this happen. How do we do it?
yeah,
What is a good challenge after the sixth loop? Let's make them do something ridiculous. That's tough enough to do. If I walked out to my front yard and poured some flour down and started kicking a ball, it would take me quite a while
yeah,
to do that, let alone if
yeah,
I'd just run 30 miles. So I think that's really neat that
yeah,
as we've had this kind of wave of this kind of normal, that so many different avenues have become ways to do these things without being around
yeah,
tons of people and just still making it fun and a challenge and worth your time. It's pretty cool.
yeah. No, absolutely. No, I completely agree. It's really kind of shown everyone's creativity, which is lovely.
Yeah, and I'm yeah, because I work in music, so I've had to see so many bands figure out how do we still be relevant? How do we play
Yeah.
shows? And I mean,
Mm.
here they're doing a lot of drive-in movie theaters where people just pull up in their
Okay.
cars, and then you get kind of a little box around your car so you can get out, but you have to stay basically either in the back
Yeah.
of your truck or whatever. And then the band
Mm.
is set up on the stage up there. So it's just been neat in this wave that we have going on right now to see people adapt and go, okay, we'll make this happen. I don't know what it's going to look like, but
Yeah.
I think moving forward, I think it's really opened up a lot of because people that couldn't get to that Tough Mudder now can because they can do it at home. So I think people it's
Yeah.
allowing people even from working from home to some people just aren't fortunate enough to be able to travel to these events. So to be able to just be
Yeah.
to log in and go, okay, cool, I got to get a shitload of flour. I wonder what the flour.
Yeah.
Did they tell you what you were going to do with the flour, or
Yeah.
they just said get a lot of flour?
So about 2 weeks before, they sent us a list of things. I know one of them was chopsticks, and I remember going around my head like, what? You know, that one actually, you had to empty a whole deck of cards upside down, and then in the plank position, turn over each individual card until you had three pairs matched with chopsticks. That was fun.
Ah, that's
um,
awesome.
yeah, yeah, that one I think was lap 7, so after 35 miles.
Oh my God.
That was, yeah. And then they told you what the actual, the actual obstacles were, I think about 3 days before.
Okay.
But with them, you can't really do any preparation. It's not like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to practice some chopstick flipping.
Yeah.
You just it's really random. So yeah.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I'm just picturing that of somebody in their apartment or their house just doing that
Mm.
planks and then flipping cards, and then their roommate walks in like, what are you doing?
What are you
Yeah.
doing? Yeah.
What is this?
Uh,
That's
yeah.
amazing. So
Uh,
to shift gears a little bit, well, not really
mm,
actually. So you teach mathematics.
that's right. Yep.
So what did that look like? How was that for you, with COVID and everything?
Yeah, I mean it's been tricky, obviously. So September we were physically in school, and my school were absolutely incredible in terms of a lot of the schools in the area unfortunately had to close for a couple of weeks, or they had an outbreak or something like that. But mine was fantastic and really on top of everything. So actually, we remained open all the way through to Christmas, and then at the start of January, we entered another national lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I was teaching from home from the 4th of January up until 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think. So the end of February, I think, or
Okay.
first week of March. But that was really tricky, really, really tricky. And you become a teacher for quite a few reasons. One of them is a passion and love for the subject, which was still, I still got to do that, which was great. I was teaching live streaming every single one of my lessons from home. A lot of my students got to meet my cats, which was
Yep.
nice for them. But I was teaching to blank screens. They weren't allowed their cameras on,
Oh
so
yeah.
you know
Okay.
I missed my students. I love seeing my students. I love seeing their little faces in the morning, and even their bored faces when I'm teaching them quadratic equation. It's you become a teacher to love your students, and
Sure.
there wasn't really any of that. But I knew it was temporary, and we've been back now. We're currently in Easter holidays, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll be back next week, and I'm looking forward to hopefully having a full summer term with them.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love teaching.
What grade or what age do you teach?
So I teach 12 to 16-year-olds.
Oh,
So
okay.
we call it year 7 to 12. Well,
Okay.
11.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I was listening to some news program, and they were talking about the cameras and how people weren't the kids weren't able to have them on, and I was just like, it's again one of those things I've never thought about because I've never taught and I wasn't doing Zoom with anything.
Yeah.
I was just with my friends. So when they said that, I was like, oh yeah, the privacy of all of it is just like
Mm.
crazy. And then I actually had um of a guy come on here who's 17, and he was telling me about his experience in high school now, and I was just
Right.
like, wow, what a different time.
Yeah.
And it was amazing hearing it from his perspective, because it was just nothing like that happened when I was in school. Like I wouldn't even have
No.
had this in high school. There wasn't that
No.
possibility.
But I was saying to my friend the other day, I don't even think I emailed my teachers when I was at school.
No.
There just wasn't an option. You saw them. at 8 o'clock in the morning and said goodbye to them at whatever time you left,
Yeah,
and that was it. Whereas now it's like, I get emails from students at 10 o'clock at night, and strange things like that. It's just a completely different world. Some schools were saying that students had to have their cameras on for safeguarding, so they could actually check that they were okay and see that their home situation was fine.
sure.
Whereas some schools said you can't have it on for safeguarding because you're looking at their private life. So it's a
Right.
tricky thing, and I didn't put my camera on for most of my lessons.
Yeah.
And trying to teach maths specifically online is quite challenging.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I'm a little bit techie, and I've got a touch screen, so it's okay to do equations and things. But
Okay.
if I was, not used to technology, I think it would have been really, really quite tricky.
Sure. Yeah, I'm imagining.
Mm.
I mean, my mom taught for forever, and then she just retired somewhat recently, and I'm like, boy, if she had to do this wave, I know I would have been getting a lot of texts and calls and like, what do I do with this? And
Yeah,
I just imagine the older generation like not insulting them because some of them are fantastic at it,
no,
but just such a different world we've been in this
mm,
last year. But that's super cool
yeah,
that you were able to adapt with that and make it enjoyable as much as possible.
yeah, yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely. I think it just makes those physical sessions so much
yeah,
more rewarding, because I appreciate being in school, and they, well, kind of appreciate it,
right.
you know.
Yeah, I've imagined when
Yeah,
everything gets back to quote unquote normal, even in my industry, I imagine there were always the old crusty dudes that were just pissed at everything, and I want to think that I go back out on tour and everything is all good and everyone's all like peace and love, but I know 2 weeks in it's going to be right back to that annoyance and pissed
yeah,
off, and I'm like, dude, we just took a year off, like we should all be happy. So I'm
yeah,
imagining this like pie in the sky world where, oh, okay, we haven't had this time for a while, so let's all just put our arms around each other and sway.
hey,
Maybe not our arms around each other right now, but
yeah, our virtual arms.
yeah. Oh man. So you all just came out of a lockdown recent this week, right?
Yeah. Well, we've had kind of like different stages.
Okay.
So up until the 7th of March, I think it was, something like that. I don't know. I don't do all the social stuff. So I just kind of, I think it might have been the 28th of March. We weren't
Okay.
allowed to see anybody at all. It was, stay at home completely. And then I think the 28th of March is you're now allowed to see someone outside in your, and then it's changed to you can now see up to 6 people, well, up to five, six in total,
Yeah.
in your own back garden, which is nice. And shop we opened up 2 days ago. So obviously supermarkets have always been open and essential shops, but you can now go and buy a t-shirt or whatever it is that people buy these days, from 2 days ago. And then the
Nice.
next one's in, I think, a couple of weeks. We'll
Okay.
go up to the next stage. So kind of
Yeah.
staged release.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild seeing.
But events are starting to open up, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just wild.
So go for
It's
it.
I mean, here it's just kind of a free for all. It's just every state for themselves and just do what you feel comfortable
Mm,
with, and so it's kind of wild. So I'm always interested around the
right.
world to hear how it's feeling and what it's looking like, cuz
Mm,
yeah, there's just places here that are like, nope, nothing's happening. Let's open up, and that kind of boggles my mind, but
well,
um all right. So
yeah.
I asked this to everybody on the podcast. So if no COVID restrictions were happening and I came to you and I said, Jamie, I have a plane ticket to anywhere in the world, where would you go to?
Mm. Well, I'd be biased because I've already been there, but Bali, I think.
Okay.
I think Bali, definitely. Yeah, I went there a couple of years ago and it was just incredible. I would definitely go there again. The opportunities, the landscapes, not very good for running. The places that I went, too much traffic, but
Okay.
it's absolutely beautiful. and great opportunities and amazing food. So
Yeah.
Bali.
I had a friend who I forget where he was right before Corona hit, but he was over in that part of the world, and then he ended up with his partner getting a bungalow in Bali for 7 or 8 months, and I was just like,
Yeah.
"You bastard! You had the greatest spot to be for Corona." I've
Yeah.
not been to Bali yet, but I would love to. Everyone I know that goes there has just it's just been mind blowing for them. So yeah,
Yeah. It's
I
just
would
incredible.
I would
Absolutely
love to
lovely.
go there as well. Where's your favorite place you've been to so far?
Mm. Well, it would be Bali, I
Okay.
think, probably, or Nepal. I went there a couple of years
Oh,
ago. Yeah, just incredible. I mean, yeah, Nepal
yeah,
is a really amazing. Yeah,
yeah. You're talking
we
food
definitely
now.
recommend it.
Nepal. I would be in heaven eating over there. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I
Mm.
we were my partner and I we were in Riga, Latvia, and we went to an Indian restaurant, and our waitress was from Nepal, and so she wrote down a bunch of like local
Nice.
spots that we needed to hit, and I was like, I will go there, and then all this happened, and I was like, I will someday. I will get to Nepal. um.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh
So
no, that's amazing.
I have two more questions for you. And the first one is, what would
Sure.
you want the world to know about you?
What would I want the world to know about me? Um, oh, it's funny. I've done loads of podcasts and I've never been asked that question. So well done for coming up with an original question. What would I want the world to know about me? I think, uh, I think a continuous fight and sort of a fighting spirit for what I feel is right and what I feel is right for myself, and that kind of constant connection with what is right for me and what the kind of journey that I want to take myself in. That's what I think. That's probably a really bad answer, but that's how I feel.
No, I think that's a fantastic answer. I I have a lot of people when asked that, and when I got it turned on me for the first time, I was kind of like, "Oh God, what do I say?" But I think that's perfect. Of you're
Yeah.
always fighting, you're always adapting, you're keeping going, and I think that's beautiful.
Hmm.
So you did great. I think you did great.
Yeah. Good.
And then last
Yeah.
one is
10 points.
yes, 10 points for you. Uh, Last question is, if you had the ear of everybody in the world, what would you say to them?
I had the ear of everybody in the world. Oh, what do you mean by that?
If you were on a stage and literally everybody out there was listening to you and had you had the active ear of all the world, and
Ah,
you had a message you could give to them.
okay, gotcha. Um, I think my main message would be the power of perseverance. You know, just being able to crack on and to really fight through what you believe is right, to fight for everything that you do and continue fighting. You know, keep your head down, keep cracking on, but actually every now and then just pop your head up and have a look at where you are, because this place is amazing, and the journey that anybody takes, irrespective of how difficult it is, it's your journey. Take the time to appreciate it and persevere through those difficulties.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It reminds me.
That would be my message.
I love it. I have a song title or a song that I love when I was going through a really tough time in my life, and the lyrics are "Snails see the benefit, the beauty in every inch," and so I like to think about that when I'm thinking
Hmm.
about life. Of like, all right, it is a struggle. Everything is, even if it's your struggle and someone else
Yeah,
doesn't think it is, it's your struggle. But just keep going and love every inch of it. And even if you're motoring along at a very slow
yeah,
pace, just keep rolling and keep going. Yeah. So
yeah. Oh, absolutely,
I love that message,
definitely.
man. And I appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with me and hang out.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, cheers, man. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you very much, and you. Perfect timing. The electricians have just turned up.
Ah, perfect. All right, brother. Take it easy, man.
All right.
See you.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Beautifully Human podcast. To hear more beautiful stories from beautiful humans, follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at the Beautifully Human Podcast. Peace signs up.